Hello and welcome to the latest installment of the Board Game Barrage Top 50 Board Games of All Time. This is the second episode in which we're going to be going over games ranked 40 to 31. Last time in the Peanut Gallery, we had Mike Delisio of the Dice Tower, and this week we are joined by Monique, the Lavender Tank, and Naveen, the yet-to-be-determined color tank. We have to right the wrong of not having him on the show. They are both from, as many of you will know, Before You Play, a wonderful series on YouTube where they do playthroughs and give reviews and just general board game discussion. They are amongst our favorite people in the board gaming world, and we are...
In the world.
In the world. Yes, that's right. I shouldn't put the caveat of the board gaming world. In the entire world. I would say in the universe. Kellen restricted it to the world. I'm going to say universe. Monique and Naveen are going to be critiquing our picks. So let's get into those picks with pick number 40. Neilan, give us your 40th favorite game of all time.
Did you say today we're talking about 40 to 31?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Pay attention, please.
Well,
please pay attention. It's all I ask of you.
Yeah. We're way past that. Probably about 100 episodes past that.
My 40th favorite game of all time is Coloretto. This is
What has this fallen a million places?
This is actually going to be a pretty common theme this episode, not going to lie. Coloretto has fallen 11 spaces, and that is just purely by lack of play. I think Coloretto is still a great game. It's not the game that comes front of mind anymore where I'm looking for a small game to break out with like family or non-gamers, but it is still a lovely press your luck set collection game where what you are doing on any given turn is playing a card to one of 3 hops.
Yeah. Exactly.
And then you choose whether you're going to either play a card to the hop or take one of those piles of cards. We're going to say piles. No one says hops. Hops is not a word. You choose one of those piles or you add a card to the pile. And then when you take a pile, you're out. So it's about pushing your luck as far as you're willing to go in order to collect cards of specific colors, in order to assemble sets, and they score depending on how many cards of each of those colors you have at the end of the game. Very, very simple, very easy to teach, but still just very agonizing as you feel like you're going to add cards to a pile, but hope you don't get cards that you don't want. Because one of the fun things about this is some of the scoring conditions reward you for having cards in a very specific range, but too many of a certain card, and you start to get negative points. That is my preferred way to play Coloretto. There are a couple of different ways you can do the scoring, but this is a game that scales from as mean as that to as kind as you want to. It is lovely, it is friendly, it is bright and colorful, beautiful, vibrant, chameleon art. Coloretto. You can take it anywhere, small box.
My 40th favorite board game of all time is the wonderful, and I'm going to butcher this, so someone help me, inductive reasoning game, Zendo. And do I know the difference between inductive reasoning and the other type of reasoning? Hell no, I don't. But Zendo is a wonderful game where you have a bunch of shapes. You have triangles, you have pyramids, cylinders, paper towels. You have all the different shapes and colors, red, yellow, blue.
Raspberry?
No raspberry this time, Neilan. Very clearly, no raspberry. And in Zendo, one player has a rule, and that rule is something very simple. All the blue pieces must touch red pieces. And how the game works is that player will lay out a structure using all the building blocks in your toy chest, and we'll say this is an example that follows the rule. And the game has rules, but it's literally everyone building structures to test hypotheses. Neilan will talk to you about alchemists, and yet doesn't have Zendo on his top 50 list where the actual inductive reasoning is happening. Players will build a structure and say, "Oh, master, does this follow the rule?" And then I will hand out a stone, and that stone will tell you whether it does or it does not follow the rule. And then what you do when you think you know the rule is you have to turn in a guess marker that you acquire throughout the game and make a guess, and you must be exactly right. I think Zendo fits into this weird party game / thinky, fun exercise that is always surprising. The latest edition from Looney Labs also comes with a bunch of clue cards so that you don't have to be the one coming up with those clues, and also has a sort of series of escalation from easy to medium to hard. I think that every board gamer deserves to try Zendo. I could not fathom getting rid of Zendo from my collection. Every time I pull it out, it's just so odd as a board game experience, and yet something that I enjoy returning to year after year. My 40th favorite board game of all time, Zendo.
My 40th favorite game of all time is Ginkgopolis. Ginkgopolis is a game that, when I think of it, I think of like a Frankenstein of games. It's got card drafting, it's got engine building, it's got area control, it's got resource management, it's got all these things to it. It's got cards, and it's got tiling, where you have a three-dimensional quality as the tiles go up. It's got all these different things to it, and yet it all works super, super well. It's a game where it's both strategic and also tactical. It's just got all this mishmash of things. It's a game that I've played a couple times, and yet I don't feel like I have a firm grasp of it all. So it's just a game that feels like it's got all these disparate aspects to it, and yet it all coalesces really well. The rules can be a little tough to grasp the first couple times you play it, but I think once you get it, it flows really well for all the different things that are going on. It's a game that is new to my list. It is a game that thankfully has a new edition that has just come out, because it was a grail game for a long, long time, which was impossible to find. Now you can get it, and I'm glad that you can, because Ginkgopolis is a lot of game in a small package. My 40th favorite game of all time is Ginkgopolis. So now that we've gone through our first set of games, let's see what Monique and Naveen have to say about them.
All right, coming in hot at number 40, we have Coloretto.
Mm-hmm.
That is an interesting, I am very pleasantly surprised to see that on the list.
Yeah, small footprint, small box, easy to play, easy
Great
to teach.
game.
It's a good game.
So good job there, Neilan. And of course, Ginkgopolis, a fantastic game, and I'm not surprised that it's coming from Mark.
Yeah,
right?
this one, the elevator pitch on Ginkgopolis is super hard to explain
So
in like
smart.
20 seconds what exactly is going on in the game.
Right.
But very, very good choice. It was
Yeah,
super
I
out
did.
of print for a long time, so I'm glad to see it's back in print
Yeah,
and
me
on
too.
your list.
Right. However, Kellen's choice, Zendo, I'm a little bit lukewarm on that one. You know, on first glance, it looks like a toy. Does not
What?
play like one.
That's the one with the glass pieces, right?
It's not glass. I believe
it's
it's
plastic,
plastic,
but,
but
you
it's
know.
it's technically a logic game. Lukewarm. We'll see how the rest of Kellen's list goes.
Gotcha.
Looks like I won that round.
I invited them.
Neilan, give us your 39th favorite game of all time.
My 39th favorite game of all time has fallen further than Coloretto has. Down 14 places is Aeon's End. Some of this, I do have to say, is games moving up the list. Necessarily pushes ones above them down, obviously. But anyway, Aeon's End is a deck building cooperative game. I like this a lot. It is a cooperative game where you are each playing as different breach mages, wizards, and you each have a unique starting deck, unlike a lot of deck builders, a unique character power, and a shared market, Dominion style, where you're buying cards to add to your deck over the course of the game. You are buying spells which you can equip to your breaches, which you prep on one round and then play the next round in order to deal damage to this boss and its minions that are coming against you. If left uncontested, the boss and its minions will attack your city of Gravehold, and once that's taken down to 0 health, you've lost. So what you're trying to do is constantly counter all of its powers and its minions and its special power, because each boss has like some sort of special ability that is unique to it. Each of the minion setups is unique to each of these bosses, and these can be hugely divergent in how they play between each of the bosses. So each boss is an exercise in figuring out how it plays, how to strategize against it, how to craft your deck to specifically overcome it. I mentioned this when I talk about Aeon's End a lot. It reminds me of video game boss battles, and that is an exercise in repetition, but not in a bad way, in throwing yourself at a thing, trying something out, and then losing and realizing, okay, this is how I'm going to twist this the next time round. I love that style of cooperative game that forces you to learn how to beat it rather than giving you everything you need to win on your first attempt. You add to that all of the versatility and the variability of all the expansions, and there is so much game to be discovered in Aeon's End. This, I think, has only fallen just through, I would say, a overabundance of deck builders in my life. Like, I feel like as you play a lot more deck builders, the mechanic itself starts to just feel a little bit like something that I am less excited to return to, but I definitely think Aeon's End is one of the more interesting ones. In fact, one of my top 3 deck builders. That is Aeon's End.
Still have not played, still never been invited to play by Neilan, so the jury is out. My 39th favorite board game of all time is new to the list for me, and it comes to us from the only true and living Dr. Reiner Knizia. I love everything about this game, and it is Stephenson's Rocket. What I adore about Stephenson's Rocket is that it is a train game, but it's not, and I have to imagine that annoys people on both sides of the house. The true trainers among us saying, what? This game is more like Acquire than a train game. This isn't like my precious Cube Rails. This isn't like my precious 18XX. Stephenson's Rocket has you getting shares in trains and then having to use those shares in order to influence where the trains go. And what ultimately seems to end up happening with our group every time we've played this is that those auctions become a way of forcing other players to lose their shares as opposed to really multiple people sort of building up an influence in a train. It's, well, we're going to go this way, and another player literally has to move the train in a different direction in order to continue their own strategy. And so they have to bleed their shares. So a lot of the movement in the game becomes about bleeding other players' shares as opposed to caring about where the train goes in the first place, which I think is hysterical. The scoring in this game is so opaque that I think I have now played this a number of times and do not know how to do well. I know that similar to Acquire, you must bump your train into other trains and then make money on that sort of transaction. I think that Acquire was a game that I loved growing up, and I really, really do think Reiner Knizia looked at Acquire, made some changes, took away all the luck, and put this train theme on it. It really just feels like sort of everything in the kitchen sink is in this. It's opaque. It is really, really mean and tense, and you don't really, really know what's going on, and you're always having a great time. I really enjoy Stephenson's Rocket. The new edition from Grail Games is beautiful. I have the extra maps for this, and this is one that I want to hang on to for a very, very long time.
Kellen,
What?
this is the first double crossover, I believe, that we've had.
The very first?
You and I,
Wow.
of course. The Natural Alliance.
At this spot?
No, I had it in the previous.
Oh, that's right.
Of course, Neilan hasn't been paying attention.
Oh no, we actually had one last time.
Well, this is the first one that's being called out, so this is the first one that counts.
Fair. I forgot it. I love that tradition.
Yeah. I'm, again, obviously a huge fan of Stephenson's Rocket, as it has already made my list of top 50 games of all time. Speaking of games that are opaque, as Kellen just said with Stephenson's Rocket, and speaking of games that are sort of Frankenstein-y, as I mentioned with Ginkgopolis, my next game, my 39th favorite game of all time, is also new to the list. And it is a sort of opaque, strangely put together game. It's the only Richard Breese game that I have, which makes me feel like I definitely need to play more Keyflower, because this is Reef Encounter. Reef Encounter is a game about parrotfish. It's a game about reefs. It's a game about sea life, vying for control.
Game about life.
Game about life in the sea. But really, it's also actually a stock game. It's also actually like a little bit of a war game. It's a weird mix of these different types of games. It's hard to describe this game because the way that things are obfuscated, it makes it hard to describe. But basically, you are parrotfish that are trying to take control of this reef by eating it and then taking control of different colors of the reef. But it's a very cutthroat, abstract game that almost feels like Tigris and Euphrates to me. It's that sort of like, maybe a little bit like a chess-like sort of game with heavy interaction, sort of old school Euro feeling. It wasn't until I played this a couple times that somebody mentioned that a lot of people consider this a stock game because you are sort of investing in these different types of coral and you can manipulate how much they're worth at the end of the game. And that realization sort of illuminated another aspect of the game. It's a game that is not very often talked about. Even when people talk about Richard Breese's collection of games, they mostly talk about the Key series, and rightfully so. I like a lot of those games. But Reef Encounter is just this weird game that I always feel is like super refreshing, super different, that I always enjoy playing. So my 39th favorite game of all time is Reef Encounter. Now let's encounter before you play as they go over our 39th favorite games of all time.
Okay, so we have not played any of these.
Any of these three. Heard of two of them, but not the third one.
Right. So Aeon's End.
Yes.
We've heard that that is a fantastic game. And it is cooperative deck building, I believe.
I have always been drawn in by that box art, that monster that's kind of like towering over whatever is in the middle of that box. The monster just kind of attracts my eye, and I have no idea what else is going on.
I'm going to assume that that's a good choice here,
What?
Neilan.
Yeah.
We've heard very, very good things about it. And if I play it, I feel like I would like it.
Yeah, I've looked
So-
into it, and there's a lot of expansion content for this game.
Right.
So I think that's what's kind of scared me away from dipping my toes a little bit.
Stevenson's Rocket, that is I believe that's a Reiner Knizia title. And
Knizia,
so very on brand
late
for
90s?
Kellen.
Yeah.
And I will say, even though we have not played that title either, we really appreciate the fact that it's from the 90s, right? That is a true classic.
I would like, I would like to
Modern.
play this game.
Yeah.
Apparently it's about trains and transportation.
And Reef Encounter, I'm assuming that's not the same as Reef.
I don't think so, no.
Also an older title, still also have not played that one.
That's
but
the
now,
one I have not heard of, so I literally can't say anything about this one.
But now we're curious. So thanks for the recommendations, guys.
Again, I think I come off best in that.
They hadn't even heard of your game.
Two that they've heard of, but they don't care enough to even play them, and then one that they're intrigued by. Which one wins, Neilan? Jeez Louise. Neilan, tell us about your 38th favorite game of all time.
My 38th favorite game is probably the game that has fallen the furthest on my entire top 50. This is Dominion. I spoke already about deck builder fatigue, and I don't know that it could apply to anything more than it does to Dominion for me. I mean, this is the OG deck builder. This is a game that I remember playing very early in my hobby, which, was at that point, it was a while after it had been released. It is a pure deck builder. You are buying cards from the market to add to your deck to play the cards, and that is the entire cycle of the game. Eventually, you're accumulating points, and I think the thing that's brilliant about Dominion is a couple of things. A, finding the appropriate time to pivot from running an engine to accumulating points without running out your engine too soon. And secondly, the fact that it's so variable. Even in the base box, you're not playing with all of the cards in a given game, and that's before you start to talk about the many expansions. I have since moved on from my copy of Dominion. It's just not a game I was playing anymore. There are many deck builders that not necessarily do exactly what Dominion's doing, but are closer to the taste of what I want out of a deck builder game. I can see this eventually slipping off of my list, but there's this balance of me thinking that there is a purity to Dominion that I still love. It is a game I will never turn down the opportunity to play, but it was probably not one I will be floating anytime soon.
I played it this year. Wow.
Yeah?
It holds up.
Still does?
It's so good.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. I've not played it in a long time.
You're getting out the piles of cards.
Yeah.
Annoying. There's
Sure.
annoyance, but it's so good.
That is Dominion.
My 38th favorite board game of all time has fallen over 20 spots from last year, and this is coming off a play that I had this year of Genoa. Genoa is my favorite trading game. Let me confirm. Depends on how you define trading, but yes, Genoa is my favorite trading game. One of the things that many people love about a trading game like Chinatown is how distilled everything is. And I would say that Genoa is not that. Genoa has a game attached to the trading, which helps make the values of things be incredibly variable. You are auctioning off all the actions that you can take on your turn, trying to collect resources to fulfill contracts. The things that you do in the game feel like standard Eurogame mechanisms, but the fact that you are only allowed to take one of your actions on a turn and everyone else must auction for your other actions is hysterical. It is literally hilarious. I don't want to not sell Genoa because I do think it's absolutely worth trying, worth playing if you like trading. You can trade anything in Genoa. You can trade your coins, you can trade future promises, you can trade your current actions, you can trade spices, you can trade the pots that the spices come in. There is just so much underneath Genoa that supports the trading. I feel like we don't have this anymore, and this is a little bit of an older title, but I really like Genoa. I cannot see myself parting. I did have a good game of Genoa. I fleeced the out of these kids. I fleeced them. Okay. They did not see what was coming when I played Genoa this year with them. That is what they get for playing with an old timer like me. My 38th favorite board game of all time, Genoa.
My 38th favorite board game of all time is new to the list, but it's been around for a couple of years. I have a interesting sort of history with Smartphone Inc., my 38th favorite game of all time. When this came out, I was really excited. It has an interesting theme where you're selling your smartphone manufacturer and trying to sell them around the world. It's an economic game, which I go for. So I was really excited about it. Then I heard middling things. Then we were fortunate enough to be taught the game by none other than the Fandango tank Mike DeLisio at a Dice Tower West. And then I found myself enjoying it, but not being necessarily blown away. So then over the next couple of years, whenever we were talking about games to play, somebody would suggest Smartphone Inc. and I'd be like, oh, okay, let's play. I might be sort of middling about it. But every time this game hit the table, I loved it. I just absolutely loved it. It is a mid-weight economic game that is fighty as you're trying to horn in on markets before your opponents could get in there. But it is a undeniable economic game. It's not like a light it is an economic game. It's also got this spatial aspect where you get your actions and resources based on the way you manipulate these two cards. It's probably the weakest part of the game, but it's interesting. The other thing I love about it, aside from the fact that it's a fighty economic game and that it has an interesting theme and is a beautiful design, beautiful layout, looks very striking, is the fact that it's so intuitive. To go along with the design chops that it has, the board is laid out where every phase of the game is clearly laid out. You know exactly what's coming up next. For a game that has a lot of moving parts, a lot of things that connect with other aspects, like your pricing connects with the turn order, all these things are sort of like combined together. It's laid out beautifully and, again, very intuitively. And it's like, if I want to play a fighty economic game that isn't going to like overwhelm people or going to take a hour-long teach or is going to feel too painful to people who are, averse to that kind of thing, Smartphone Inc. is a great fit for that spot. It's a game that you can teach quickly. It's a game that if people have questions, a lot of times they can figure it out just by the way the board is set up. They can tell, okay, this phase is coming up next. The design is clear. It just offers a lot and a lot of stuff that I really, really like. So my 38th favorite game of all time is Smartphone Inc. Let's find out what Monique and Naveen think of our 38th favorite games of all time.
All right, so there's some pretty decent titles here that I see. Dominion. Okay, this is one of Monique's.
I like Dominion.
Favorite games, I think.
Favorite is a stretch.
Favorite games that got you into the hobby, right?
Yeah, Dominion is a fantastic game. Good job, Neilan. I'm really liking your picks so far. That is like one of the most classic deck building games, right?
Totally.
That's like the deck building game.
I am very bad at it, and for me, I'm not a big fan of it.
Smartphone Inc., also a good game.
Yes.
Probably plays better at higher player counts, is what I would imagine. But
we played it at 3, and it was okay for me.
So that's an interesting pick.
Yes.
That's an interesting pick from Mark, because it is thinky. But not quite heavy. I feel like that would have been more of a Kellen choice, but I'm still with it.
Yeah, maybe I'll show up somewhere else on this list.
And Kellen picked Genoa.
Yeah.
That's a weird reversal.
Okay, so I'm a big Rudiger Dorn fan, and however, I have not played this one, but it is right up my alley, and it's something that I would love to try to play at some point.
So I guess good job on that one too. Better than the previous, better than number 40, I think.
Yeah.
Wow. It seems like we have a theme to this peanut gallery.
Neilan, tell us about 37.
My 37th favorite game of all time, slipping down a few spots, not that many, is Archipelago. This is such a wholly unique game. It is a semi-cooperative game, and I dare say it is the only semi-cooperative game that actually works. It is a heavy Euro game on the surface. But what that belies is a game that has very interesting hidden scoring conditions. Everyone has a different part of the scoring puzzle, as it were. And you're trying to figure out what other people are doing in order to get themselves to their scoring condition. But each of the scoring conditions is also paired with a end game condition. So once you think you've figured out what their scoring condition is, that might also give you some indication of when the game is going to end. And this is all doubly important because layered on top of all this is this whole idea that if you don't cooperate in some fashion, the whole island is just going to descend into chaos. The whole archipelago destabilizes and you all get driven out and presumably killed. That is Archipelago, the impetus of a game where you're all playing different parts of a larger game, but still have to lie and manipulate and work together at least a little bit in order to stop the whole thing from just falling apart, especially if you have the sympathizer who is actually trying to destabilize the whole thing. and they end up winning the game when that happens. This is such a unique, novel concept. Other games like New Angeles have attempted to replicate this formula, but don't really work nearly as well as Archipelago does. Fantastic game, Archipelago.
Yeah, I can't emphasize enough how much people should try this game, but how they may not enjoy themselves. My number 37th favorite board game of all time is new to the list. It barely missed out the list last year as I had not played it enough. I have since played it enough, and I am excited to announce that Beyond the Sun is my 37th favorite board game of all time. This game is billed as Tech Tree, the board game, and in fact it is. What a mishmash of mechanisms that somehow all work together in a smooth way. This game is so smooth. You get it all out, you set it all up, and you go, oh God, this is going to be annoying. This board is huge. These player boards are annoying. There's the sideboard with the spaceships. And then your turns are lightning fast. Not even Turn Turtle Neilan could take a long turn in a game of Beyond the Sun. Beyond the Sun has you sort of working with a player power, working against the achievements that are in the game, and balancing what technologies are available to you each game in a fairly ugly-looking production, I would say. I think that the one caveat for me, the one star caveat, and that is this is sort of like that spice rack where you've got all the different spices. You're like, every game is going to be different. And then by the time you've added 12 spices, every game sort of feels the same. And you're like, hey, wait a minute. I thought we had all these different spices. I think this is rife. I think this needs the expansion. And I think the expansion needs to not be so constricted. I think the expansion needs to break free from the shackles of the Euro-ness. With that said, I have played this so many times over the past 2 years. I am still eager to play more. I enjoy it every time. There is the push and pull of what other players are doing. I prefer this at a higher player count than 2, and yet lightning fast. Like, you can half the length of this game just by virtue of playing it a few more times. I am so impressed by Beyond the Sun. I love it an awful lot.
My 37th favorite game of all time is by Mr. Pfister. This is Maracaibo. Maracaibo to me feels like the grander version of Great Western Trail. It's got a lot of the same mechanisms. It's got where the board is a rondelle. It's got the card manipulation, but it's got a lot more than that. Specifically when it comes to the cards. With Great Western Trail, there was a couple ways to manipulate the cards. Maracaibo, the cards are very much multi-use. There's a lot going on there. There's an aspect where you're fighting for 3 different nations and you sort of try to balance where your loyalties lie and how much you help these nations. It's just a much more meaty version of Great Western Trail. Both games I love. Maracaibo slipped down 10 places from last year just due to a lack of play, but it's a game like Bruges where it feels like every card promises something interesting. Every time you draw a card, every time you buy a card in Maracaibo, you feel like, oh, this card does so many things. How do I want to use it in this instance? How is this card, which is full of possibilities, going to yield me the greatest advantage? So I just love that. I love that excitement on every acquisition of a card. I know that Monique and Naveen have definitely played Maracaibo as they did a series of games of Mr. Pfister. So let's see if they agree with my analysis.
Okay, Neilan, Archipelago. I have played Archipelago once, and it was
crushing.
It was a little bit crushing. You know, there's a mechanism in that game that lets the game end early. If a certain condition has been met, everybody pretty much loses. And I was so relieved when the table lost.
There was a struggle to learn this game when Monique first played it. And so I think that's why.
That's going to have to be a miss from me here, Neilan.
That's a misfire for you.
However, Kellen is regaining some cred here with Beyond the Sun.
Yeah, this is a really good one. This is one of my favorites from last year when it came out. I was pleasantly surprised by this game. The look on the table looks pretty
all
dated.
Mechanisms, no look.
That's right, exactly.
But I think we had really started playing the game after we heard Kellen's praises of it.
Yes,
so,
that's right.
So it's nice to see that on your list. And of course, Mark with Maracaibo. Fantastic game, very on brand. Have to really agree with that choice.
That is a great one.
Playing to... You knew who was going to be on which episode.
My brand is fantastic. That's all I've got to say.
You don't have a brand. Your brand is
Neilan, what's the brand of your 36th favorite game?
My 36th favorite game is up 10 places. I'm sure Kellen will be excited to hear. Innovation.
Yeah.
This is a 2-player card game by Mr. Carl Chudzik, he of the multi-use cards. In Innovation, you are playing cards both for their symbols in one of a multitude of categories and for their powers. Now, if you choose to use a card for its power, you have to have more of that symbol than your opposition, or they get to do the power as well, which often isn't something you want to do because some of these powers are wild. In fact, I would say that is the core thing about Innovation. You draw a card from the deck, you read the power, and you're like, that just seems wrong. That just seems broken. I can't wait to use this. You play it out to your tableau. Hopefully you have more symbols than your opponent because you've been curating symbols of that type, and then you get to use that power over and over and over again and watch them cry as their tableau crumbles apart, as you steal cards from their score pile, as you do horrible things to the cards on their side of the board. But then the pendulum swings the other way and they come up with a broken card that perfectly counters yours, or they're able to build a defense of the symbols by splaying their cards or expanding their options by moving into a new era of the game. The game has these 10 ages that the cards fall under, and each age has cards that are even more wild, even more broken than the age before. It's such a wonderfully swingy game that just feels so tense. I have played this mostly on Board Game Arena in the last couple of years, and I still just thinking about my turn and the anticipation waiting for my next turn and fear of what the other player is going to do. It's just so tense. It kind of feels like the game is constantly on this knife's edge of you being able to run away with it and just having it all torn away from under you. I dig this game the more I play it. I kind of had a bad run with it, I would say, a couple of years ago, where I was kind of convinced it was more than I wanted in my games. But then as I played it more and more, I just sort of started to sort of get the cool ways that the cards, especially in the early run of the game, combo together and what you are ultimately building towards with more determination rather than just like hanging on to the whims of the next card I draw. That is Innovation.
Neilan?
Yes.
The double crossover.
Oh, man.
Neilan and Mark, natural combination, natural alliance.
Natural pair.
That's right.
Where was this, Mark?
This was 41 for me.
Okay.
So you were almost correct.
Almost correct.
My 36th favorite board game of all time is a Paolo Mori classic that does not get enough love because the edition that we have is from Cool Mini or Not, and it features lots of miniatures of people wearing really ridiculous hats. And that is the classic Dogs of War. Dogs of War is one of the harder to describe games because of how much is going on and how simple the rule set is. There are games of tug of war being played between various houses of different colors. And you are playing a worker placement game where you are collecting rewards right now in addition to investing in the various factions. So every turn, you want something different to happen. On this turn, Mark might be begging me, whatever you do, Kellen, you cannot play in this battle on this side. You're going to turn the battle against me. And you have to min and max your way to victory and figuring out which house you are most invested in. You start the game with some affinity towards a house hidden under your napkin, but as you keep going, you are investing in the various houses. You are scoring points right now, scoring points at the end of the game. Really just a delightful, tense, sort of area control, sort of worker placement, tons of negotiation, tons of laughter. There are some designer variants that are definitely recommended. Once you've even won a battle, you can sort of overkill the battle and win even more, which is hilarious. Everything about this game is better than you would expect, and I would be shocked if this doesn't come back in some form in the next 5 years. I would be literally shocked. I love Dogs of War, my 36th favorite board game of all time.
This is like top 3 game I most want to play. Like, I'm desperate to play this game.
You never played?
I've never played. I've had chances to play, but I want to play with you guys, so I've held off.
You're too busy around with whatever you got on your list.
Well, what I've got on my list, the as you call it, was designed by a guy, you might have heard of him, Reiner Knizia.
What?
Does he design?
It depends. Relationship advice?
Oh, that's true. That's fair. He does design a lot of actually. But this is not. My 46th favorite game of all time was Babylonia, and it shares a lot in common with my 36th favorite game of all time, Blue Lagoon. Blue Lagoon, like Babylonia, is a route-laying game. It's a more route-laying-y game, I would say, than Babylonia. Blue Lagoon is all about, sort of like in a Go style, like his other game, Through the Desert. You are trying to lay a route that gets you to certain points. You might want to get the points to get to huts. You might want to go to certain places to pick up resources before your opponents do, because once they're picked up, they're gone. There's also an aspect where you want to build the longest route, or you want to build a route that touches a number of different islands. And in doing so, you're often forced to consider tempo considerations versus your opponents. You're thinking to yourself, I really want to get to that island over there, but Neilan is, right on the edge of the adjacent island. He could cut me off if he wants. Can I spend one more turn not building that lane and hope that Neilan doesn't start cutting me off? Or do I need to take that action right now and just get it done? And if I really need it, I need to just do it now. This game is full of that tenseness, that tempo consideration. Can I hold off one more round? Can I use my turn to do something else? Or do I need to forget about that other thing that I'm hoping to do and just do the thing I need to do right now? It's also a game of two phases, something I sort of like, something I may be coming up later on my list.
Two-faced.
So my 36th favorite game of all time is Blue Lagoon. Speaking of two, there are two people who are going to be taking shots at our 36th favorite game of all time. Those two people are Monique and Naveen, and here they are now.
As much as these guys talk about innovation, I have never played that game. Have you?
No, I have not played it, and I think we're reserving our first play to play with you guys, from what I understand.
Yeah, well, that was news to me, but I guess that's what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that it's on the list, but
Yes.
we can neither confirm nor deny whether or not the game is good.
I know, yeah. I'm
However,
assuming it is.
Dogs of War I had played once, and I remember feeling like it was good. It was decent. It's a lot of area control from what I remember. And area control does not feel particularly good for me, but the pieces are beautiful. And so I think I'll go to Kellen with that one.
I have not played this one, but I do love dogs and I do hate war.
Makes sense. And Blue Lagoon is a fantastic game. And that's another Reiner Knizia. I really hope that you guys are keeping track of how many Reiner Knizia games are making it on this list, because it's probably quite a bit,
I think
right?
he's made half of all board games, so it makes sense that he would be on this list.
Yeah, it's a good pick, Mark.
3 of my first 15 games are Knizia games, so seems like I'm doing things right, according to Monique and Naveen.
Are you sucking up to them? They're not even here. That's with a peanut gallery, Mark. We turn them off.
It's a long-term sucking up. I'm playing the long game.
Yes.
Neilan, is your 35th favorite game of all time a long game?
Maybe. My 35th favorite game of all time is up a couple of spots. It is Hansa Teutonica. This is an excellent game. It is straight up one of the best dour fellows on a boring box out of Germany you'll ever play, but that belies a game that is fighty and mean and interactive. Like, on the surface, it looks like a game where you're just building routes connecting cities to each other, but it is so brutal. It requires you to sort of get in the face of every other person at the table. You're blocking them constantly. In fact, that is one of the core strategic things you do in Hansa Teutonica, is strategic blocking in order to benefit. Because every time you block a player from being able to build a route, if they decide to unblock themselves, you get a benefit. You get more pieces onto the board. You have multiple routes that you can go in order to upgrade each of your sort of base abilities, whether that's taking more actions on your turn, being able to transport more of your merchants around the map, being able to score better from your routes at the end of the game. I've seen all of these strategies work in different games of Hansa Teutonica. And one of the things that's most interesting about Hansa Teutonica is that the game comes to an end quicker than you'd think. Once someone passes 20 points, which is not that many points in the grand scheme of things, the game is just about over. So you have to be scrabbling for building these routes as quickly as possible while everyone else is trying to do everything they can to stop you from establishing these core routes. That is Hansa Teutonica, an excellent classic game from 2009. It is quite good. please do not look at the old box. Look at the new big box, bright, colorful box, and then play Hansa Teutonica.
Absolutely an amazing game, Hansa Teutonica. My 35th favorite board game of all time is new to the list for me. I played it for the first time last year online, and I have since played it in person a few times, and I am just in love with Pax Porfiriana. Pax Porfiriana is a game that I've had for over 5 years, sitting in my cupboard, too afraid to open the box. I think that most modern board gamers are probably familiar with Mr. Worley's Pax Pamir, and specifically Pax Pamir 2nd Edition. Pax Porfiriana is more of a card game than Pax Pamir is. There is less area control. You're using a deck of cards, of which you only use about half of them, I believe, in a 4-player game, and you are building gun stores, making haciendas. You are in Mexico trying to topple Diaz, and it is a squirrely game where things are just shifting away from you, and you don't understand who is holding the knife and who is working with you. So the game can be in one of 4 different regimes, and you win the game by toppling Diaz, who has the prestige value of the 2 opponents that have the least amount of prestige in that regime. And so everyone's points, for lack of a better word, matter. You're sitting there going, okay, that point plus that point, and you're sitting there going, okay, I could potentially topple on this turn, and boom, suddenly you're in a new regime, and you have no idea what's happened, and the market has changed dramatically. It uses some similar systems to Pax Pamir, where you are purchasing cards from a card row, and those cards are getting cheaper and cheaper as no one buys them. There are a ton of swingy events. There are cards that can be used for multiple things. I really like card games, and this is perhaps the heaviest card game I own.
This is one that I desperately want to play as well. You've picked a couple games now that I really want to play.
I think that we would have a grand old time playing Pax Porfiriana if Pax Pamir 2nd Edition is any preview of what we're going to have. It's going to be a whole hell of a lot of what the is going on right now and who is winning this game, because I really can't quite figure it out. But the stories that you end up telling about the regime changing at the exact wrong moment that topple your ability to win the game at the last moment is hysterical. What a unique game, and one that I hope to explore for many more years to come. And that is Pax Porfiriana.
My 35th favorite game of all time has already been mentioned by Kellen. This is Genoa.
Same episode, double crossover,
same episode. Kellen and Mark, the natural partnership. It is also appropriate that Kellen mentions Genoa, because Kellen is the reason I played Genoa for the first time. I had not heard of it before he mentioned it on one of our podcasts.
Rugadadorn, never heard of him.
Excuse me. He's already talked about it, so I won't belabor it, but Genoa is a game where everything is up for negotiations in a Euro wrapper. It's really well done. If you like negotiation and you like Euro games, Genoa is like the game for you. It's great. It goes a little long. That's the one strike against it. But I just love the fact that on your turn, you just negotiate everything. You can negotiate the way the pawn's moving. You can negotiate the resources. Everything's up for negotiation. I just absolutely love that.
We could make a subtitle for this game, Genoa, the game Sidereal Confluence wishes it was, and it would still have a shorter title than Sidereal Confluence.
And I agree with that. I actually agree with that. I think it's a superior game than Sidereal Confluence, but Will, Naveen, and Monique think it's superior as they analyze our 35th favorite games of all time.
Ooh, 3 for 3 on the strategy games, maybe heavy games? I don't know. We have only played one out of these
one of these three, yeah.
So, Neilan, gotta hand it to you, that is a fantastic choice. For those of you who like to sit and stress, Hansa Teutonica is a great game.
Yeah, that one, it just came out with a new big box, so I think there's more maps in there. And yeah, this was a fantastic game, and I 100% appreciate the fact that this is on your list.
I'm not surprised that Kellen chose a PAX game, but I'm also surprised because it's not a party game.
Yeah, all I know is it's Phil Eklund. I don't know too much more about this game. The only one that we've played a PAX game is PAX Renaissance.
We had a very bad experience with it. So we're going to try our best not to correlate that with this choice, Porfiriana. And Genoa, you know, I am pleasantly surprised to see that Mark has chosen this one as well, because I honestly thought that it would have been Mark's pick to begin with. And I was surprised to see Kellen had chosen it, but now it's here.
Here it shows up.
It is a Mark game. You're right.
Okay. Neilan is picking half my top 10 here with innovation when no one's giving him Archipelago.
2.
It's Love and Kellen.
Neilan, what's your 34th favorite game of all time?
My 34th favorite game of all time is Up 6 Spaces. This is one of 2 Stefan Feld games on my list. In the Year of the Dragon, I don't often associate Stefan Feld with mean, horrible, harsh games, but In the Year of the Dragon is exactly that. This is a game where if you're not being careful, you will go from having multiple beautiful multi-tiered palaces filled with citizens to a couple of turns later, desolate, half-destroyed palaces and corpses. Because any turn, any round of the game where you cannot feed your people, or you cannot provide medicine for your people, or you cannot pay the tax collector, the people in your palaces die. It's horrible. It's harsh. You can only get so many of them throughout the game, but if you're not able to keep up with the events, which are in a randomized order at the start of the game, then you just cannot keep them alive. And they are the reason that you will be scoring points throughout the game, at the end of the game. Each of them is associated with a different action. You're going to be wanting to collect fireworks before the firework event comes up. You're going to want to be collecting rice before the famine event shows up. It is also a game that is tight on its money. You have a very limited means to collect money, and money is used to take spots that other people have taken before you. So there's this subtle bidding for turn order, as well as making sure that you have the money to mitigate the turn order while keeping ahead of all of the events as you see them sequenced out before you. It is quite a simple game. It is beautifully harsh, and I've played a lot of it on BGA over the last couple of years, thus reinforcing how much I love In the Year of the Dragon by Stefan Feld.
Every time this game is brought up, I'm compelled to talk about the first time we played this, I think.
Yep.
When was it the first time you played it? When Dean was teaching to us, and the phrase, your people die,
Yes.
came up so many times in the teach. It was hilarious.
You've never invited me to an invitation to play this online.
I think we should fire up a BGA game of this. I think you'd like it, Kellen.
Yeah.
Oh, is it on BGA?
I think it is on BGA, yeah.
Oh, great. Yeah, let's play it.
My 34th favorite board game of all time is in the same spot as it was last year, a tried and true worker placement game. We have a problem, board gamers, and that problem is in 2021 and 2022, the future, we are defining worker placement as anything we want it to be. Doesn't matter how many workers are on the spaces, doesn't matter if they're spaces, it's a worker placement game. But before we got to that, we had the harshness, we had the pain of collecting wood to build your farm. We had Agricola, the by far de facto best game by Uwe Rosenberg, who has since gone off the deep end. This is a painful game about raising a farm and trying to feed your family that is buoyed by so many lovely interlocking mechanisms. You are collecting your wheat. You are buying an oven so that you can bake bread so that you're better at feeding your family. You are making animals that have uve sex, and they are making more animals for your farm. You are putting up fences. You are having the most delightful farming game, but at the end of all of it, it is pain. You are barely making it, and the scoring is sort of like, if you don't make it, you get all. And that is what a good worker placement should be. That is what Agricola should be. Agricola, just a absolute classic game, and one that I adore and do not love to play with people who love it. For whatever it's worth, there is a lot of the strategy is baked into the cards, which I am not good at because there are so many different decks that you can play. I would say that anyone who loves any of the modern Uwe games would absolutely be excited to at least try Agricola, one of the sort of pinnacles of the genre, once the number one game on Board Game Geek, and oh, how we have fallen to Gloomhaven.
I love Agricola. Like, this is the game that cemented my love for Uwe. It has unfortunately slipped off of my list this year, but you can imagine that it's just hovering right below the bottom of my top 50. It is fantastic.
He didn't take the bait.
We'll be revisiting that later. Thank you very much, Kellen.
Yes.
My 34th favorite game of all time is down 21 spots. And for those scoring at home, I forgot to mention that Blue Lagoon was up 13 and Genoa was up 3 from last year. But True Colors has unfortunately dropped 21 spots to the 34th favorite game of all time. True Colors is a game where a question is asked about the personality of the people you're playing with, and you secretly vote on who you think it most applies to. My classic example of this is the time that we were invited to play it at somebody's house, and the question came up, you are stuck on a long plane flight with somebody. Who around the table is the person you least want to be with? We voted in secret, and the person who got the most votes was the person who was hosting the game night. That sounds really bad, and it is in some respects, but there are also opportunities in True Colors to get to know the people around the table and get to know what the people around the table think of you. And it's rarely as harsh as that. I would say it's never as harsh as that example, but I'll never forget at Barrage Con a couple of years ago, where the question came up, who was the most sort of tech savvy? It boiled down to who's the most tech savvy person in the room. And these two guys had an argument. I forget who won,
what
but whoever
did
did
you forget?
win.
I won.
It was
Okay. And Neilan was flabbergasted. But when you play this with people that you are comfortable with, I think it's a great experience. You get a lot of how could you? You get a lot of honestly, inside feeling great about what people think of you and surprised about what people think of you. And it's maybe not a great inclination, but there's something, I think, primal about being able to tell people what you actually think about this is not a game where you're just slandering people left and right. I want to make it clear that's not what the game's like. But you get to tell people things you might not feel comfortable telling them because you're doing it in secret, and they get to sort of learn these things. I've always left a game of True Colors feeling excited and great and happy, and it's just a very revealing, provocative experience that I've always enjoyed. It does drop quite a bit because I've realized that it's just a game where you have to play with the right people, because if you don't, it gets bad, because either people are going to feel bad if they're not comfortable with other folks around. Do not play this in a situation where one or two people are new to the group, because that's terrible, because they never get voted for and they don't know who to vote for, and it's just really strange. But if you've got that group that is very tight-knit, I think True Colors is a great game.
I have two things to say. One, I will never forget when I learned that my sister-in-law would rather see Christina naked than her own husband. That is the first thing I learned, so I'll never forget. And I love how the game doubles down on not only do you have to vote, but then you have to vote on what you think, how other people will perceive you. So there's a doubling down of you can look dumb twice, which is not only do you not think you're going to get any of the votes, you suddenly got all of the votes, and you have to reveal to the whole room that you didn't think anyone would vote you, the worst cook in the room. Wow. What a game.
And speaking of doubling down, I love the fact that you vote twice. So if you think it really is Neilan who's the worst cook, you don't have to just put one orange token. You can put two. You could split. You could say, Kellen and Neilan are both terrible cooks, so I'll put one red and one orange. But no, Neilan is the worst, so I'll put two orange tokens. I just love that fact. You can amplify.
But I think your warnings are apt, and, for the lack of social grace that everyone probably thinks I have actually voted in this game in a way to just try to not hurt people's feelings as opposed to how I actually feel.
Right.
Because things are getting testy.
So let's see if Monique and Naveen's True Colors shine through.
Yeah, you're going to get got on this one.
Yeah, I know. As they criticize our 34th favorite games of all time.
I am kind of surprised to see Agricola this low on Kellen's list, as highly as Kellen talks about this stressful farming game.
Yeah, it is a very stressful game. It's fantastic, though. It's a really, really good one, and it stands the test of time.
It does. And I assume In the Year of the Dragon also does. That's another title that we haven't played. We know that it's Stefan Feld.
I've heard it's very mean.
Oh.
Yes. Not like you're mean to each other. The game is mean to you.
Oh, okay. Neilan. Interesting. I never thought of Neilan as liking the mean stuff.
That's bad stuff.
But Mark with True Colors. I think I've heard Mark talk about True Colors in a previous episodes, but the cover of that box really does not lend itself.
I think you can make either really good friends or really big enemies with this game, from what I understand. So that's brave, Mark. Very brave.
I am brave.
Yeah, even when they don't like your pick, their response is very brave, Mark. instead of, wow, you've made a huge mistake. I see how this is going.
Neilan in for the mean stuff.
Yep, that's me.
So unlike
It
you.
is.
Neilan, is your 33rd favorite game of all time a mean
It
one?
is not. It is very pleasant. It is a new entry on my list, shooting up to 33. I love this game, and I'm sad I didn't play it sooner. This is The Search for Planet X. This is a pure deduction game. It is a game where you have a circle which represents the night sky, and each sector of the circle has a unidentified astronomical body in it, whether it is a comet or an asteroid or a dwarf planet or Planet X itself, which, as the name suggests, we're all trying to find. But we do that only by identifying the other objects in the night sky in order to infer where Planet X is. You can never locate Planet X directly. You do this by taking a series of actions, whether that is searching a certain subsection of the sky or trying to focus on a specific sector, which you can only do once or twice a game, or by researching. There are a bunch of different rules that the game will reveal to you via the app. This is an app-driven game, so you might take a research action which will say to you, okay, here's a rule of the current game we're playing. Comets always are next to asteroids, say. And if you research that rule, you now have a sliver of information that other people at the table don't have. One of the things that makes this quite brilliant is that at regular intervals of the game, you have to push information onto the board. You have to, in order to score points of it at the end of the game, seed some of your knowledge. So people are imparting things from you over the course of the game, but it's at your discretion whether you're going to give away your biggest secrets, which are going to be worth more points for you, but give more information to other people, or be deliberately misleading about information you have, which is going to be costing you points in the long run, but isn't giving information away to the other players. It's such a fun little puzzle. It definitely is Sudoku-esque, which I know would be a negative for some people here, but for me that's a huge positive. It feels like a really fun puzzle, and while it does involve a lot of heads down people trying to figure out their puzzle, this element of interaction where you're seeding information onto the board for other players is just enough to make it feel like there is just this intense competition that you all have a unique perspective of. I like this game a whole lot. I think this is one of the best app-driven games that I've played, because while it does require frequent interaction with the app, it does feel like you're engaging with something that is both uniquely a board game while also utilizing the technology in a way that feels appropriate. This is The Search for Planet X. Came out a couple of years ago, but I only got to it earlier this year. It's fantastic.
Neilan, I want to play this game, but my internet's down.
How dare you?
You like app games. Bah, ha, ha. Okay. My 33rd favorite board game of all time is Warm. It is nostalgia. It is that sort of game that I have played for so many years and will continue to play, but sits in the kitchen like the cookie jar. It is Wizard, my 33rd favorite board game of all time. It's very similar to the game Oh Hell, with some special hijinks going on. It is a relatively pure trick-taking game where you have to bid on the amount of tricks you plan on winning at the beginning of the round when you see your cards. And then you have to try to win that exact amount of tricks. There is so much laughter in a game of Wizards, so much hilariousness as players try to win and lose the different tricks. This is a very pure card game moment, feel-ski thing for me. I love and adore Wizard. I play with the variant where the dealer has to make the bid uneven. So the game is played over a series of rounds where you start with 1 card, then 2 cards, then 3 cards, then 4 cards. And so in a 5-card round, this variant means that if all the players' bids must add up to a non-even number, meaning everyone cannot win a round of Wizard. And I love that variant. I love that little twist where it gets back to the dealer and the dealer has to bid something that they don't even want to bid, but they have to because that is how you play. A more recent, perhaps more popular game than Wizard now is Skull King, but that has sort of gone off the rails for me. It is too much. Wizard is more pure, the better game, one of my favorite card games ever, and one that I would never say no to. Wizard, my 33rd favorite board game of all time.
My 33rd favorite game of all time is new to the list. but it is a part 2, so it is not a new game in that respect. So I guess it is a new game in that respect. This is Glenmore 2 Chronicles. What I love about Glenmore 2 is, again, how strange it is. This is a common theme in my list, games that are sort of like offer things that are unique. So what is happening in Glenmore 2 is you move your pawn as far down a column of tiles as you want, pay for the tile, and then add that tile to your tableau. Wherever you place your tile, that tile triggers, and all tiles surrounding it triggers. So it's got that engine building thing where the more you build this tableau, the more you're getting. Tile placement is important because you want to activate certain tiles at certain times. But the thing that I love the most about this aspect of the game is that move as far down the lane as you want, get whatever tile you want, but if you jump too far ahead, you're leaving a lot of options for the people behind you because the person who's at the back always takes the next turn. So if I jump way ahead to get that very, very valuable tile, well, I'm not going to be grabbing a tile for quite a bit of time, most likely. The other thing that I love about Glenmore 2 is the fact that it really encourages you to attack the weakest link, because another unique aspect of the game, which is again full of unique aspects, is the scoring. There's scoring that happens a number of times during the game, and the way scoring works is for different categories of the game, you score points based on how far you are from the person who is in last place in that particular type of resource or that particular aspect of the game. For example, one of the type of tiles you can grab are these person tiles where instead of adding them to your tableau, they are sort of set aside and they activate different ways, but they represent specific people rather than the landscape. And one of the things that you're considering whenever scoring takes place is how many of these people have you picked up? And you score points based on where you are relative to the person in last place. So if you're in last place, you're not scoring. But if you're in first place and you're first place by a lot, you're going to score a bunch of points. If you're ahead of the person in last place by just a little bit, you'll only score a few points. So it really encourages you to be aware of where you are and where your opponents are. Like if Neilan is falling behind in something, I want to attack that. I want to jump ahead. And if I'm falling behind in something, I want to rebound as much as possible to keep Kellen from scoring big in something. So it's that pressure. It's a game that feels like it should be a head-down multiplayer solitaire where you're just worrying about your own tableau, you're just worrying about your own efficiency, but you can't. You need to be aware of what others are doing. Because if you're flying in something, if you're doing great in the number of whiskey barrels you have, that's great, but if you're only one whiskey barrel ahead of somebody else, it's not really going to do you much. So you really need to make sure that you're aware of what is going on. And that's something I love about Glenmore 2. Glenmore 2 is also a fantastic production. It comes with a number of expansions in the box. Just a great overall package. So my 33rd favorite game of all time, new to the list, is Glenmore 2. Let's see what Monique and Naveen think of our 33rd favorite games of all time.
Okay, I'm assuming Kellen is referring to the trick-taking game Wizard and not the, I think there's like a Milton Bradley title on BGG somewhere.
Yeah, from the 70s.
So another one that we haven't played, but we do like trick-taking games. So although there are some pretty not good trick-taking games out there.
I've played a couple not good trick-taking games recently, and so I'm hoping that this one stood the test of time.
Yeah, we're going to give you a neutral on that, Kellen.
Neutral.
Okay.
However, Search for Planet X is, wow, that is a really good game. We're definitely between Neilan and Mark here as to who we agree with on this top list.
Totally, yeah.
But Search for Planet X is fantastic, and so is Glenmore 2 Chronicles.
Yeah, I really like how Glenmore 2 is super modular, so you can play a totally different type of style of game from game to game. I have not played all the different 9 different Chronicles I think there are, but great choice there, Mark. Search for Planet X. Oh man, this is such a good game, and I'm surprised it's actually not higher meaning down the list, meaning closer to 1, because it is a
what are you doing, Neilan?
Game.
What are you doing?
Wow, really, really good. Love it.
Well, complaints about Neilan's pick, complaints about Kellen's pick, and yet I come through unscathed. So I'll count that. And my call.
I'm sorry, it should have been higher is a complaint about my pick.
Yeah, should have been higher. What are you doing? It could be higher on my list. Could be on my number 1 game. But what is your 32nd favorite game, Neilan?
My 32nd favorite game is up a couple of spots. This is Kemet. This is a troops on a map fighty game. The thing that I love about Kemet is there are a lot of games in this genre that I like a lot and that we collectively like as a group, but Kemet largely gets out of the way and lets you get to fighting. Like, Kemet is fighting forward in so many ways. It encourages you to get into fights quickly and to get victory points through fighting, because the victory point ceiling in order to win the game is not very high. It's about 10 points. And one of the easiest way to get victory points towards that goal is by getting into fights and winning them. There are also objectives around the map that are going to cumulatively get you victory points if you hold them. And one of the best things about Kemet is that there are these trees of powers, which are basically tiered powers in one of 3 different colors in the base game. And they sort of largely map to either economic advantages or defensive advantages or attacking advantages. And you can think of those as just these tiered powers that you move down, which allows you to sort of very precisely mold what your playstyle is in any given game. It feels like you're getting more and more powerful, but every time you play Kemet, you can explore a different combination of those powers. Once you throw in the expansion and you get a 4th color of power tiles, then all your options expand even more. I love Kemet. I've returned to it now a couple of times since getting the expansion, and it's only increased my appreciation of the game. It is also purely deterministic. Unlike a lot of these games, there is no dice rolling. It's a card-based combat system that is mostly going to vary by the unique combination of powers that other people have in any given game. That is Kemet.
My 32nd favorite board game of all time is the same as the last year. I believe I have described it as the most cynical game I have ever known or heard of, and that is the Mac Gertz game Imperial 2030. I also called it a sci-fi game. That was not well received in the community. Imperial 2030 is my Risk replacement. Imperial 2030 has shades of diplomacy, shades of Risk, shades of rondelles, all put into a blender. And what comes out is just a spectacular game that is challenging to describe and even harder to play. You are sort of controlling countries until you aren't. You are investing in countries until someone takes over that country. You are striking a balance between expansion and taxing the ever-living out of your country and extracting the maximum value that you can to make the most money. If that sounds cynical, yes, it is. We have never had a bad game of Imperial 2030. The stories that come about as I took over Russia and then, plunged it headfirst into China and was only doing it for the money. And you're sort of trying to figure out how big to make a country before you start extracting value. And then you apply what is a very simple, very straightforward rondelle. I actually don't have very many rondelle games. I think I have a lack of rondelle experience, and so the rondelle here really shines for me as a sort of almost no luck game where you are choosing between 0 to 3, I believe, spaces on the rondelle, and then after that you can pay more for whatever you want. Just a delightful game, and one that makes me feel like a 12-year-old again playing Risk, but it works oh so much more for my 32-year-old cynical heart.
My 32nd favorite game of all time is down 12 spots. That's mainly because this is, to me, sort of in the realm of an event game. If I had a number of hours to spend playing a game, I might go with an 18xx game first, but right after that, I would go with Cthulhu Wars. Cthulhu Wars is a crazy troops on the map game with huge figures, with hundreds and hundreds of dice that you're rolling whenever you do combat. You're unlocking crazy powers. You're fighting over territories. It is a very splashy, very eventy game to me. This is a game where the powers you unlock are wild. When somebody says they've unlocked the power and reads it out to you, you can't believe that they now can do this. Just a really fun game. One that does what I really like and sort of need when it comes to troops on the map game, where yes, there's combat. Yes, it's influential, but if you lose a combat, you're not done. That's like the cardinal sin when it comes to troops on map games, and Cthulhu Wars handles it extremely well. It's a game that I wish I could play more, but just the eventy nature of it and the fact that I haven't played it in a while makes it drop 12 spaces to my 32nd favorite game of all time. That is Cthulhu Wars.
3 fighty games in this spot for us.
Let's see if Monique and Naveen like fighting.
They don't. So we're about to all...
Well, let's see which one they
all get caught.
Least.
Yeah.
Okay, looks like we've hit a war patch right now. So we have 3 games here, one of which we played, 2 of which we have not. Imperial 2030 and unfortunately Cthulhu Wars, which I know is totally on brand for you guys.
Sandy Peterson game,
which we know you guys all love. We have not played those 2, but definitely Kemet I have played. And
Kemet?
Kemet. I think it's Kemet.
Battle of the pronunciation.
Yeah.
What do you think, Neilan?
So is this Blood and Sand? Because I have not tried that one, but Kemet, that is such a good game. That one, you feel like everyone's going to war, but it's kind of like no hard feelings because everybody's after the same goal. And you think you're safe, but the way the map is structured, everyone is kind of 2 steps away from each other. So very, very good choice, Neilan. I really, really enjoyed this game.
Yeah, that is back-to-back fantastic choices from Neilan here. So I don't know. I think Neilan might be winning the who did it best.
Well, it's not fair because we don't know those other 2
That's
games,
true. That's
so.
true.
I think that's about as
I think the record will show that Neil
Yes,
is not winning.
Mark.
Well, you edged me out on that one. You just edged me out on that one. But I think overall, I get they're in the heat of the moment. They're not keeping score. I am keeping score. I think the record will
good
show
that you're
that
doing it for them.
I
All right.
have come up with Naveen's episode topic. It's called Boring Games That We Like Anyway with Naveen.
Neilan, is your 31st favorite game of all time boring?
It is not. My 31st favorite game of all time is up 5 spots. This is Yellow and Yangtze. And yes, let me get the thing out of the way that I have to. There are going to be a lot of people that are very, very mad that this is not Tigris and Euphrates. I will say this. I could see both of these games being on my list, but I chose not to put them both on my list. I slightly prefer Yellow and Yangtze, so that's the one that wins out on my top 50. What I like about Yellow and Yangtze versus Tigris and Euphrates is it's a lot more approachable. The general feeling of this game is that you're playing tiles in order to collect colored resources. So you play a red tile, and if you have the red leader in that cluster of tiles, you're going to get a red resource. And you're trying to do this for all of the 4 colors of the resources, but whichever you have the least of at the end of the game, that is your score. So you have to diversify across all of the colors, but each of the colors has special abilities and special restrictions associated with them. Blue tiles can only go in the water and so on. Red tiles are associated with war. And what you end up with is this beautiful board with these beautiful multicolored hexagonal pieces forming these cities, and the cities sort of grow and encroach on each other, and they eventually meet each other and battles spill out. And it's just this all-out war across multiple cities across this map as they're growing and expanding and getting each of their corresponding leaders' resources. It's close to an abstract game, but it feels really, really good and very, very evocative as you're playing it. And what I love about it is this spatial puzzle of trying to find the optimal places to place your tiles in order to affect the growth of the cities towards other people's cities, while also concentrating on the resources that are the most important to you at a given time. Yellow and Yangtze introduces this wild color of resources, which is also a point of contention, but to me focuses the game. When someone gets a yellow pagoda and is going to be getting yellow resources every single turn, that is a turning point of the game. You now have to turn your attention to the player with the yellow pagoda. I think that this streamlines a lot of what bugs me about Tigris and Euphrates while adding in some interesting mechanics in the leader powers. I like this a lot. I play this a lot, both digitally and in person. Fantastic game. Yellow and Yangtze by Mr. Rainer Knizia.
I think this one is only not on my list from lack of play. I really want to play more of this, and I think Tigris and Euphrates will never be for me because those who really like it will card shark the hell out of us and just win every time, and that is not fun. My 31st favorite board game of all time is going to be Mocked by Monique and Naveen. This is the best game by the green designer himself, one Friedman Brisa, and that is Fuji Flush, the party card game that never fails to deliver when you play it with Board Game Barrage. Fuji Flush is the lightest card game where you are trying to get rid of all the cards in your hand by playing them out to the table, and then everyone else must play a card out to the table, and if they play a higher card, they beat you, and then you have to draw a new card. But what makes it fun is that you can form alliances. You are forming alliances around that table, and you are screaming as loud as you possibly can for the other players at the table to join your alliance. Put out your 4 right now, Neilan, or else our friendship is over. There are a lot of 2 cards in this game, which has led our group of people every time we play it, to literally try to start a train of 2s, which has devolved into everyone chanting 2 chew over and over again as we play 2 chew. 2 chew, 2 chew. And you're playing with 8 players. You could get a 2 chew train that is worth 8 points, and it is very strong. It is hard to beat, and then someone beats it, and everyone on that train is mad at Mark for upsetting that train. We have a delightful time playing Fuji Flush. It feels a little like that one-time use kitchen gadget that you pull out for the exact right moment, but it is perfect for that exact right moment, and I could never see Fuji Flush leaving my collection. The best Friedman Freeze game, and not a party game, approved by Not a Party Game board gamer Kellen. My 31st favorite.
My 31st favorite game of all time shares a lot with Cthulhu Wars. This is also down, this time 14 spots, but it is a big, splashy, eventy game. This is Dominant Species. Dominant Species is a game that I love for how grand it is, all the way down to the theme. I love the idea that you are different types of animals all vying for control of the ecosphere, biosphere, whatever sphere that you're fighting over. I also, in terms of the mechanics of the game, I love the way that the action selection resolves, where you can plan out your actions. All the different actions are laid out in advance in the board. They're never changing, so you know exactly what actions fire off first, which actions fire off last. And then you are taking turns placing your pawns on the board, and you're trying to determine which order to do them in. Do I want to take one of the lesser actions that is going to fire off early because I want to make sure I get it done? Or do I want to make sure I reserve an action towards the bottom that may not fire off until later, but I want to make sure I'm in on it? Again, this is a game where that consideration, in some ways sharing some of that Blue Lagoon tempo consideration. Do I need to go right now for something I know I can get, or do I want to be a little more adventurous, a little more push my luck, and try to get an action that I may or may not get? Again, the sweep of the game, each character is a different type of animal, and they all have special player powers. Just another, again, extravagant, big, grand sweep of a game that I really enjoy. This actually might be bumped up a bit, at least in my mind, by the sort of negative stuff I've heard about Dominant Species Marine, which promised to be a streamlined version, but I think from what I've heard has cut some stuff out. I've acquired Dominant Species Marine, so I'll have to report back later, but the fact that I've heard that Marine may be a little bit of a downgrade makes me even more eager to play Dominant Species again. So my 31st favorite game of all time, down 14 spots, Dominant Species.
I didn't hear you say the name of the game, and I spent like half of that going, why is he talking about root like that? And then I got to it.
Will Monique and Naveen have the same confusion about whether I was talking about Dominant Species or root? Let's find out.
And last but not least, we have a couple more games that we haven't played.
Yeah.
Starting with, we'll start with Fuji Flush. That actually sounds like a really fun game. And it's a card game, and it seems like party-ish, although it's not a party game.
Honestly, Kellen, for me, if I was in a game library, I would probably walk right past this thing. But
it is Friedman Freeze.
It is Friedman Freeze, so I am willing to try it, but it's definitely not one that would have stood out to me from all
right.
But it sounds fun. And Dominant Species is one that we've been told is very heavy, long.
Yeah, it's always been pitched to us exactly that. Long, heavy, and aggressive. And so I think that's why we haven't tried it yet.
Very mathy.
So I think Dominant Species is kind of like this. Tonight we play Dominant Species, so I'd like to try it sometime.
I'm going to say good pick, though, for Mark, because I do love that theme. Although Yellow and Yangtze, now that is a fantastic game. It's another Rhino Knizia, of course. But it's really, really good game.
It's like the 2.0 of Tigris and Euphrates.
Right?
Yeah, they just changed the rivers.
Yeah, so fantastic choice here, Neilan. I don't know how many times we said that today. So I got to say, I think Neilan took the cake for the number of games that we actually know and love.
Oh, my God.
I don't know. Again, I think calculations. I think with their heart, maybe they're Neilan,
pretty
but
clear
with their minds,
cut.
with their picks.
I don't know.
Mark.
Can you edit together some of that? You've got 11 minutes to work with, Mark.
Yeah, you got it.
To make us sound good at the end, and Neilan just kind of write him off. Like, Neilan, no. You know what I mean? Like,
I think I can do that. I think I do a Neilan no for sure.
Good. That'll be the ending.
Thank you so much for listening to the second installment of the top 50 games of all time, 40 to 31. We will be joining you next week with the next installment, games 31 through 20. A huge thank you to Monique and Naveen of Before You Play. If you enjoy board games, if you enjoy YouTube, and you have not watched their channel, what on earth are you doing? Just always great stuff coming from them. Could not recommend it highly enough. Monique and Naveen at Before You Play. Definitely check them out. Let us know what you think about our picks at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. Go to the podcast channel where we talk about the current week's episode. You can tell us what you think about our picks on all forms of social media. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram. It might be hard to discuss our picks on Instagram, but you can give it a shot. You can write to us at boardgamebarrage@gmail.com. Go to our wiki and look at all the games we've ever discussed at boardgamebarrage.com/wiki. Thank you, as always, to Heart Society for our intro and outro song, What's on Your Mind, Kid, from their album Wake the Queens. And until next week, goodbye.
Bye-bye.
I was going to say something, but I've forgotten now. What was I going to say? I was going to say something really cool. I can't remember what it was now. So, okay. Okay.
I spoke already about deck builder fatigue. Fatigue? That's a weird way to say that. Go again. I spoke already about...
Oh,
Neilan, tell us about 37.
I didn't even know who Rugador Dorn is. So. Made Jambo? Boring.
My...
Oh, interesting.
Nope.
Made Karuba? Are you
Oh,
kidding?
what a game. Now I'm
What?
bored.
What?
What a genius that guy is.
Okay. My outrage.
My 37th favorite...
Neilan, no.